Jake Miller lived in a small, weathered house at the edge of Maplewood, a quiet town surrounded by rolling hills and dense forests. Life wasn't easy for him. At 35, he was a hard-working mechanic who spent his days fixing cars at a local garage and his evenings tinkering with old engines in his backyard workshop. Despite his skill and determination, Jake struggled to make ends meet. His dream of opening his own repair shop felt more like a distant fantasy than a possibility. The garage where he worked paid him just enough to cover rent and groceries, but there was little left over for anything else. Still, Jake never complained. He had a kind heart and a strong belief that helping others was the right thing to do, even if it meant sacrificing for himself. "You don't need money to be rich," he often told his teenage nephew, Tommy, who sometimes helped him in the workshop. "Real wealth is in how you treat people." Tommy admired his uncle deeply. To him, Jake was a hero, someone who worked tirelessly despite setbacks and always found time to lend a hand. Whether it was fixing a neighbor's broken-down truck for free or sharing meals with families in need, Jake's generosity shone brightly. One chilly autumn evening, after finishing a long day at work, Jake was closing up his workshop when he heard the faint sound of an engine sputtering nearby. Curious, he stepped outside and saw headlights flickering as a car crawled down the dark road toward his house. Moments later, the vehicle came to a stop in front of his driveway. Out stepped a young woman, clearly flustered. She wore a light jacket unsuited for the cold night, and her face was pale with worry. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she said, approaching cautiously. "My car broke down a few miles back, and I've been trying to find help, but no one's around. Do you think you could take a look?" Jake nodded without hesitation. "Of course. Let me grab my tools." As he inspected the car, it became clear that the repairs would take time. Parts needed replacing, and it was too late to get them tonight. "It's not going anywhere tonight," Jake said apologetically. "You're welcome to wait inside while I figure out what to do." The woman sighed, looking worried. "I'd appreciate that, but are hotels nearby? I don't want to impose." Jake shook his head. "No hotels in this part of town. But listen, my garage has an old cot and some blankets. You can stay there until morning. It's not fancy, but it's warm and safe." The woman hesitated, unsure about accepting such kindness from a stranger. But Jake smiled reassuringly. "It's no trouble. Just let me get you settled." The woman introduced herself as Emily Carter. She explained that she was traveling through Maplewood on her way to visit a friend in the next state over. "I didn't expect my car to give out," she said with a tired laugh. "Guess I underestimated how remote this area is." Jake nodded sympathetically. "Happens more often than you'd think. Don't worry, we'll get it fixed tomorrow." He led her to his garage, which doubled as a storage space for tools and spare parts. In one corner stood an old cot covered with a worn quilt, left there years ago by a relative who'd briefly stayed with him. Jake cleared off a few boxes and motioned for Emily to sit. "It's not much," he admitted, "but it's better than being out in the cold." Emily smiled gratefully. "It's perfect. Thank you so much, Jake." While Emily settled in, Jake headed back into the house to prepare something warm for her. He heated up a pot of soup he'd made earlier and grabbed some bread from the pantry. When he returned to the garage, he found Emily sitting on the cot, looking around at the organized chaos of tools and car parts. "You're quite the mechanic," she remarked, gesturing to the neatly arranged shelves. "This place feels like a treasure trove." Jake chuckled. "It's just a hobby gone wild, I guess. Always been fascinated by engines." They talked as Emily ate, sharing stories about their lives. She told him about her job as a travel writer, visiting small towns across the country to document hidden gems. Jake listened intently, intrigued by her adventures, but also humbled by how different their worlds seemed. "And what about you?" Emily asked after a pause. "Do you have family here?" Jake nodded. "Just my nephew, Tommy. His parents are overseas for work, so I look after him. He helps me in the workshop sometimes. Keeps things lively." Emily smiled. "Sounds like you've got your hands full." "You could say that," Jake replied with a laugh. "But it keeps me busy and honest." As the night wore on, Emily grew quieter, exhaustion setting in. Jake noticed and handed her a blanket. "Get some rest. We'll figure everything out in the morning." Before lying down, Emily turned to him earnestly. "Thank you again, Jake. Not everyone would open their home or garage to a stranger like this." Jake shrugged modestly. Anyone would have done the same. With that, Emily curled up on the cot, wrapping herself in the blanket. Jake turned off the light and quietly closed the garage door behind him, leaving her to sleep. Back inside, Jake sat at his kitchen table, staring at the steam rising from his cup of tea. He thought about Emily, her polite demeanor, her gratitude, and the stark contrast between her life and his own. For a moment, he wondered if he should feel awkward about letting a stranger stay in his garage. But then he shook his head. Hospitality wasn't about wealth or status. It was about doing what was right. The next morning, Jake woke early to check on Emily. To his surprise, she was already awake, standing outside admiring the sunrise. "Good morning," she greeted him warmly. "Sleep wasn't great, but I'm alive and safe thanks to you." Jake grinned. "Glad to hear it. Let me grab breakfast before we tackle your car." Over pancakes and coffee, they discussed the repairs. Jake estimated it would take a day or two to source the parts needed, depending on availability. Emily nodded, though there was a thoughtful look in her eyes. "I'll pay whatever it costs," she assured him. "You've already done so much." Jake waved her off. "Don't worry about it. We'll sort it out later." What Jake didn't know was that Emily had begun thinking about ways to repay his kindness. Not just for the shelter, but for the warmth and humanity he'd shown her. And little did he realize, her actions would soon bring unexpected blessings. Not just for him, but for the entire town. As the day went on, Jake focused on fixing Emily's car. He worked methodically, explaining each step to her as she watched curiously from a nearby stool. Despite their different backgrounds, they found common ground in conversation, sharing stories about challenges, dreams, and the places they called home. At one point, Emily pulled out her phone to check emails. Jake noticed how professional her tone became as she typed, and he couldn't help but ask, "Do you travel for work full-time?" Emily hesitated briefly before nodding. "Yes, I write articles for a magazine. It's not glamorous all the time, but it lets me see parts of the world most people overlook." Jake smiled. "Sounds like you're making the best of it." What Jake didn't realize was that Emily wasn't just any writer. She was the daughter of a wealthy entrepreneur who owned a chain of auto repair franchises across the country. Her travels weren't just for fun. They were part of her research to identify potential locations for new businesses. But she kept this detail to herself, wanting to enjoy Jake's company without complicating things. By late afternoon, Jake had made significant progress on the car. As he wiped grease from his hands, Emily stood up and stretched. "You've been incredible, Jake. Honestly, I don't know what I would have done without your help." "It's no big deal," Jake replied with a shrug. "Just doing my job." Emily studied him for a moment, struck by his humility. Most people in her world expected something in return for their efforts, but Jake seemed genuinely content helping without ulterior motives. It reminded her of why she loved exploring small towns like Maplewood. The authenticity, the kindness, the sense of community. Before leaving, Emily handed Jake a folded piece of paper. "This is my contact information. If you ever need anything, or if you want to talk about expanding your workshop, I'd love to hear from you." Jake accepted the note politely but didn't think much of it. "Thanks, but I'm sure I'll be fine." Emily smiled knowingly. She knew Jake wouldn't reach out. He wasn't the type to ask for favors. But that didn't matter. She already had a plan brewing in her mind. A few days later, Emily returned to Maplewood, not as a tourist, but as an investor. This time, she arrived in a sleek rental car and parked directly outside Jake's workshop. When Jake saw her step out, he was surprised and slightly embarrassed by the state of his cluttered garage. "Emily, what are you doing back?" he asked, wiping his hands on a rag. "I came to repay your kindness," she said simply, "and maybe offer you an opportunity." Jake frowned, confused. "Repay? You already thanked me plenty. An opportunity? For what?" Emily gestured toward the garage. Let me explain. While I was here last week, I couldn't help but notice how talented you are, and how much this town could benefit from a proper repair shop. My family owns a network of auto repair franchises, and we're always looking for skilled mechanics to partner with. Why not you? Jake blinked, stunned. Partner? With me? Yes, Emily said firmly. We'll provide the funding, equipment, and marketing. All you need to do is run the shop your way. Think of it as a chance to turn your dream into reality and bring jobs to Maplewood. Jake shook his head slowly. I don't know, Emily. That sounds too good to be true. It's not, she insisted. You deserve it. People like you remind me why helping others matters. Let us invest in you. For a moment, Jake struggled to find words. The idea of owning his own shop had always felt impossible, given his financial struggles. But now, standing face to face with someone offering him exactly that, he felt overwhelmed with hope, gratitude, and disbelief. Finally, he nodded. If you're serious, then okay, let's do it. Emily beamed. Great. Consider this the start of something amazing. Little did Jake realize, this decision would transform not only his life but also the lives of everyone around him. Within weeks, Emily's promises began taking shape. A team of contractors arrived in Maplewood to renovate Jake's old garage into a state-of-the-art repair shop. New tools, lifts, and equipment were installed, turning the once cluttered space into a modern facility. The sign outside read Miller's Auto Repair and Training Center, honoring Jake's dream while hinting at something bigger. At first, Jake felt out of place in the sleek new environment. He wasn't used to such luxury or the attention it brought. Neighbors stopped by daily, curious about the transformation. Some offered congratulations. Others expressed skepticism, wondering if Jake had struck a deal with the devil. But Jake stayed humble, assuring everyone that nothing had changed. Except now, he could help more people. Emily stayed involved, visiting regularly to check on progress. She was thrilled to see how Jake planned to use the shop not just for repairs, but also as a training center for young mechanics in the community. This is exactly what I hoped for, she told him during one visit. You're creating opportunities, not just for yourself, but for others. Jake nodded. That's always been the goal. If someone gives you a chance, you pass it on. The training program quickly gained traction. Jake recruited local teenagers, many of whom lacked resources or direction, teaching them everything he knew about cars and life. Among them was Tommy, his nephew, who eagerly soaked up every lesson. Uncle Jake's the best teacher ever, Tommy often bragged to friends. He doesn't just teach us how to fix cars, he teaches us how to be better people. Word of the shop spread beyond Maplewood. Drivers from neighboring towns started bringing their vehicles, drawn by Jake's reputation for honesty and skill. Business boomed, allowing Jake to hire additional staff and expand services. What had once been a struggling mechanic's dream was now a thriving hub of activity and kindness. But Jake didn't stop there. Inspired by Emily's generosity, he implemented a sliding scale payment system, ensuring no one was turned away due to cost. Families who couldn't afford repairs received discounts, or even free service, thanks to a fund Emily helped establish. It's not charity, Jake often said. It's paying it forward. One evening, after closing the shop, Jake sat with Emily in his small office. I still can't believe you did all this, he admitted, shaking his head. Why me? There are plenty of other mechanics out there. Emily smiled softly. Because you reminded me of what truly matters. Kindness, hard work, and community. You didn't expect anything in return when you let me stay in your garage. That's rare, and it deserves recognition. Jake chuckled. Guess I'm lucky, huh? No, Emily replied firmly. You earned this, every bit of it. As months passed, the ripple effect of Jake's success grew. Families who benefited from discounted repairs began volunteering their time to clean the shop or assist with paperwork. Local businesses donated supplies to support the training program. Even kids joined in, organizing car wash fundraisers to raise money for future projects. Through it all, Jake remained grounded. To him, none of this was about fame or wealth, it was about using what he'd been given to uplift others. "I didn't do anything special," he often said. "I just helped someone in need. That's all any of us can do." What Jake didn't realize was that his story was inspiring others far beyond Maplewood. Articles about his journey appeared in magazines and newspapers, highlighting how one act of kindness had sparked a movement. People across the country began sharing their own stories of generosity, proving that compassion knows no bounds. And through it all, Jake stayed true to himself, a humble mechanic who believed in the goodness of people and the endless possibilities of paying it forward. Jake's story quickly became more than just a local phenomenon. It sparked a chain reaction of kindness that reached far beyond Maplewood. Inspired by his training program and sliding-scale payment system, people began finding their own ways to give back. What started as one man's simple act of generosity had grown into a movement, proving that even the smallest gestures could create waves of positive change. One of the most impactful initiatives was the Maplewood Helpers Network, launched by a group of volunteers who'd been inspired by Jake's work. The program connected skilled workers, mechanics, carpenters, electricians, and plumbers with families in need. Whether it was fixing a car, repairing a roof, or installing new wiring, these efforts brought the community closer together. Jake played an active role in expanding the program, using his connections to recruit more volunteers. He often said, "If I can fix a car, someone else can fix a sink. And together, we can make life better for everyone." The program gained so much traction that Emily stepped in to provide additional funding and resources. Her family's company helped establish training centers where unemployed individuals could learn valuable skills, empowering them to contribute to the growing network of helpers. For many, this was a lifeline, a chance to rebuild not just their lives, but also their confidence. Meanwhile, Tommy thrived under his uncle's mentorship. Once a restless teenager unsure of his future, he now dreamed of opening his own repair shop someday. "Uncle Jake showed me that hard work pays off," he often said, "and that helping others is the best way to live." Inspired by Jake's example, Tommy also started a youth outreach program, teaching kids about mechanics and teamwork. "If Uncle Jake can change Maplewood," he told his friends, "then we can change the world, one car at a time." Even skeptics were won over. Some initially questioned Emily's motives, wondering if her generosity came with strings attached. But when they saw how Jake used his success to benefit others, not just himself, they realized the purity of his intentions. This trust encouraged more people to join the movement, knowing their contributions would be put to good use. One day, during a community event celebrating the expansion of the Maplewood Helpers Network, Emily made another surprise appearance. Standing beside Jake on stage, she addressed the crowd. "When I met Jake, I thought I was the one giving back. But he taught me something far more valuable, that true leadership means lifting others up. Together, we've created something extraordinary." As fireworks lit up the night sky, Jake looked out at the sea of smiling faces. Children ran around with balloons shaped like wrenches and cars, while adults exchanged stories of how the program had changed their lives. It was a moment of pure joy, one that reminded him why he'd started this journey in the first place. But Jake knew the work wasn't done. There were still countless communities in need, countless lives waiting to be transformed. With Emily's continued support and the growing army of volunteers, he vowed to keep pushing forward, to inspire others to believe in the power of kindness. Little did he realize, his legacy was already spreading far beyond what he could see. People across the country were sharing his story, starting their own versions of Maplewood Helpers, and proving that compassion knew no bounds. And through it all, Jake stayed true to himself, a humble mechanic who believed in the goodness of people and the endless possibilities of paying it forward. Years later, Jake stood on a stage in front of thousands at the annual Kindness Drives Change Gala, a nationwide event celebrating acts of generosity and community service. The room buzzed with energy as volunteers, donors, and beneficiaries gathered to honor those who had made a difference. But for Jake, the moment wasn't about applause or recognition. It was about gratitude. "I never thought letting someone sleep in my garage would lead me here," he began, his voice steady but warm. "I just knew it was the right thing to do. His words resonated deeply with the audience. Many had followed his journey from the beginning, a mechanic who chose kindness over indifference, sparking a movement that touched countless lives. Now, he was no longer just a symbol of generosity. He was a leader, an advocate, and a role model. Jake went on to share stories of those whose lives had been transformed by the Maplewood Helpers Network and other initiatives inspired by his work. There was Maria, a single mother who'd received free car repairs, allowing her to keep her job and support her children. And Jake Jr., a teenager who'd learned mechanics through Jake's workshops and gone on to start his own business. Each story was a testament to the ripple effect of compassion and determination. But Jake didn't stop there. He used his platform to call for broader change. "We've made incredible progress," he said, "but there's still so much work to do. Every day, people struggle with challenges we can't even imagine. Together, we can fix that." His speech ended with thunderous applause, but Jake's focus remained on action rather than praise. He continued advocating for systemic reforms, pushing for affordable training programs, accessible transportation solutions, and sustainable community projects. His efforts inspired lawmakers to draft legislation aimed at supporting underserved populations, ensuring lasting impact. Meanwhile, Emily watched proudly from the sidelines. What had started as a simple act of gratitude had grown into something far greater, a legacy of hope and unity. She often joked that Jake had changed her life as much as she changed his. Through him, she rediscovered the joy of giving back and learned that true wealth lay not in possessions, but in connection. For Jake, success wasn't measured by awards or headlines. It was reflected in the smiles of families driving away in repaired cars, the laughter of kids learning new skills, and the strength of communities coming together to support one another. He carried his values with him every step of the way, proving that doing the right thing could create waves of positive change. One evening, as Jake walked through the workshop where it all began, he paused beneath a string of lights hung years ago. He thought about the man he'd once been, the one who'd simply wanted to help someone in need, and smiled. That decision had opened doors he never dreamed possible, not just for himself, but for countless others. A young boy approached him, holding out a handmade card. "Thank you for showing me I can help too," he said shyly. Jake grinned, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You already are helping, and you'll inspire others, just like you've inspired me." As the years passed, Jake's legacy continued to expand. Families who had received help began volunteering themselves, creating a cycle of generosity that strengthened entire communities. People who once felt invisible now felt valued and empowered to make a difference in their own right. Little did Jake realize, his journey was far from over. His simple act of kindness had ignited a movement, one that would continue inspiring countless lives for generations to come. If this story inspired you, don't forget to share it with friends and family. Let us know in the comments. How has kindness impacted your life? Your stories inspire us to keep creating tales that matter.